Can we start? Yeah, hello everyone. Welcome to the MOOCs live session, the third session for this course on the ecology and society. What we do now is please log in, sign in, and pour in your questions if any. Meanwhile, what I do is try to briefly summarize what we have done in the last couple of weeks, primarily in the beginning from the ninth week till the 12th one. So what we have covered in these 4 weeks chiefly is to engage in the various debates on the environmental ethics, and I've chosen the 3 important approaches. Most importantly, deep ecology, social ecology, and the economies, the eco-feminist philosophy. So I'll begin trying to briefly summarize some of what we have done in the past few weeks. So since we all know that environmental ethics is a significant component of the environmental philosophy, which considers extending the notions of how these boundaries of ethics solely from the perspectives of the humans and also including the non-human growth. Now, we have also partly engaged in earlier weeks to engage in looking at the human-nature relationship, and therefore this in some way is inclusive of the environmental philosophies. Now, we begin looking at the history of by tracing the history of the American environmentalism, which engage in a tussle or a struggle between the preservationists who propagate the idea of preserving nature in its pristine form or as a wild species for their own sake, and on the other hand, the utilitarians who, with the help of science and rational management, transform nature into a useful commodity. That is by maximizing the utilities. So therefore, we have necessarily engaged upon trying to look at the various debates of environmental ethics, which has been an important factor which relate to nature rather than to culture. So we have wanted also to look into how the wilderness thinking emerges by basing on the works of Roderick Nast, an important environmental historian, and primarily by engaging upon his book that is The Wilderness and the American Mind, which tries to critically look into the Americans' attitudes towards the idea of wilderness. So Nas, by doing so, engage upon discussing the various attitudes that humans have towards nature. So therefore, he presents America's anthropocentric view as one of the main, enemy to all the wilderness. So therefore, Nas argues that the ecocentric view is important and also may work in the long run, but perhaps the preservation of nature and wilderness for the sake of holding resources out for the preservation of our own species would be more salient. So therefore, Nas view nature appreciation as an indication of a culture's maturity. So therefore, wilderness is not counterpoise to civilization, but is in fact one of the important indicator of the flowering of civilization. So we go on to looking at the binaries which existed between the deep ecology and the shallow ecology, which the Norwegian philosopher Arne Næss coined the fresh deep ecology to describe our deep sense of ecological awareness. So shallow ecology, on the other hand, is anthropocentric, and which is human-centered, and it views human as above or outside nature, and then as the source of all value, and ascribes only the instrumental or the use value to nature. On the other hand, deep ecology does not segregate or separate humans or anything else from the natural environment. It does see the world not as collections of isolated objects, but as a network of phenomena that are fundamentally interconnected and interdependent. So therefore, deep ecology recognizes the intrinsic value of all living beings, and also views human beings as just one particular strand in the web of life. So therefore, Næss claims that the essence of deep ecology is nothing but to engage in asking deeper questions by questioning the value of our society and also to the development of a total view. So in other words, we can say he engaged upon trying to have a holistic worldview. So therefore, he discusses the importance of the norms of ecological equality and self-realizations. So what one of the main important argument which Næss has engaged upon was that science and technology alone cannot solve our environmental problems. So therefore, Næss gives an alternative by saying that the essence of deep ecology is to ask deeper questions. That is, it is only by asking deep questions of today's industrialized, growth-oriented, or so to say, a materialistic society that will force a paradigm shift. So therefore, one should not simply engage upon concentrating on the simple Cartesian solutions to the causes of pollutions, for instance, but to engage in probing or digging a much more deeper to obtain the holistic views. And then Næss claims that the cultivations of an ecological self would also involve a materially simple lifestyle, and then values that maximize the quality and also the richness of our expectations. So this is very much evident when being asked by whether what he meant by deep ecology in a simple sense. Arne Næss have answered that simple in means and rich in ends provides a very short and strong messages when he explained the idea of this deep ecology. So therefore, he goes on, explaining about what are the differences between the shallow ecology and the deep ecology, whereas shallow ecology is perceived to be more anthropocentric and views and place humans above nature, and which is very much ascribed the notions of this instrumental use value is very much embedded in it. So therefore, deep ecology recognize the intrinsic values of all living beings and also views human as one of the particular strand in the web of life. So we then move on to looking at the other environmental ethics, namely social ecology. So this very term, social ecology, is coined by or given by Murray Bookchin, who is an American anarchist and libertarian socialist. So this very term was, explicitly used in his book, that is Ecology and Revolutionary Thought, published way back in 1964 by Murray Bookchin. So what social ecology tries to espouse is the idea that the environmental crisis which we have encountered is a result of the hierarchical organizations of power, and also the notions of this authoritarian mentality, which is rooted in the structure of our society, which is very much imminent or embedded in the human social structure. So this Western ideology of dominating the natural world arises from these social relations. Our worldview, our perceptions, attitudes, behaviors towards nature in some way is being influenced by the social relationship which we share with our fellow beings. So this domination of nature by men's it stems from the very real dominations of human by human in a simple sense. So social ecology, for that matter, aims to replace the mentality of dominance with an ethics of complementarity. That is, such an ethics truly evokes a sense of how our true role, which is to create a fuller, richer, and for all beings. So therefore, the ethics of complementarity has a spiritual dimensions that is sometimes described by many of the social ecologists as the respiratizations of the natural world, but it is also clearly not called for a deistic theology in that sense. So the spirituality advanced by this social ecology is very much definitively naturalistic rather than supernaturalistic or pantheistic in that sense. So therefore, the core principles of social ecology is that ecological problems arise from the deep-seated social problems, and ecological problems cannot be understood or much less resolved without facing the social issues. So in one sense, the ecological, the problems of ecological solutions actually lies in solving the social problems or social issues. So therefore, he goes on to argue that the social hierarchy and the class legitimizes our domination of the environment and also underpins some of these the way in which we engage upon this consumerist world or the consumer system. So therefore, the root cause of these environmental problems, such as the trade for profit, or the industrial expansions and the identifications of progress with the capitalist or the corporate self-interest, in some way is problematic. Hence, one needs to find out an alternative or solution. So we are also being informed that, and then one of the social realities that the elite class, which constitute a small and negligible percentage of the populations, manipulates the natural resources for their own benefit, but only at a substantial cost to the environmental and a disadvantage majority chunk of the social good. So therefore, there has always been a tussle between development and environment, and it was also being presumed that industrialization was one of the major goals for the ecological degradation, and therefore social ecology emphasizes that the destiny of human life goes hand in hand with the destiny of the non-human. Therefore, giving utmost importance to even the non-humans. species. So having said that, we move on to the other environmental ethics, that is the ecological feminist philosophy. So by now, I'm sure that you all are familiar with the term called ecofeminism, where the another subsets of feminism or the subdisciplines of feminism, which tries to espouse the idea of or explain uh, women in relationship with nature. So the ecological feminist philosophy is a form of a philosophical approaches which emphasizes to the variety of different connections between feminism and environment. So within this, the different perspective of this feminist perspective, there are comprised of the liberal, traditional, Marxist, socialist, and so on and so forth. So what all ecofeminist philosophers do share in common is that there are important connections between the dominations of women on the one hand and the dominations of nature on the other hand, and that there is urging needs or a failure to recognize these connections, which result in the inadequate feminism or environmentalism, or for that matter, environmental philosophy. So therefore, we could see that there is a twin dominations of women and nature in value dualism. That is, there is a disjunctive pairs in which the disjuncts are seen as oppositional rather than as complementary. That is the binary which is being created between culture versus nature, human versus nature, and men versus women. So such forms of binaries or dichotomies are being created. So therefore, one of the important role which the feminism and environmental ethics is to engage in exposing and dismantle this dualism, and also to rethink and reconceive those mainstay philosophical notions, that is based on reason, rationality, knowledge, objectivity, and so on. So therefore, one of the important issues which is also being raised by the ecological feminist philosophers is that the oppressive patriarchal conceptual frameworks of creating this agent, that is, for example, racism, classism, or the heterosexism, in some way are unjustified dominations of the non-human nature. So therefore, many ecofeminists and the ecological feminist philosophers have documented many empirical evidence by linking feminism and the environment. So many ecofeminists, including Murphy and Saleh, explores the symbolic association and then the devaluations of women in nature that appears in arts, literature, religions, and theology, and so on and so forth. So therefore, one of the main goal of the feminist environmental ethics is nothing but to develop theories and practices concerning humans and the natural environment, which are not centered around or male-based, and which provide a guide to action in the pre-feminist present. So then we also move on to looking at some of the importance or relevance of indigenous knowledge, or which is also called as the traditional ecological knowledge. So we have deliberated upon how the indigenous knowledge system emerges as people's perceptions and experience in an environment at a given time and place, or it is based on a particular specific locations, based on the process of observations and interpretation, by looking at the everyday rationality and transcended the borders of different communities. So therefore, we could see that the indigenous knowledge is nothing but which is being the knowledge which is passed on by or informed experience and practical demonstration, uh, more often shown than articulated. It is as much skilled as a concept. So therefore, it is indigenous knowledge is a practical common sense that is based on good reasoning, and it is logic built on experience. So therefore, IK is knowledge systems which are cumulative and representing generations of experience, and also careful observations which are based on more of trial and error experiments. So we have also deliberate upon by taking the works of engaging upon the works of anthropologists like Tim Ingold, who is a leading scholar within the ecological anthropology, who have argued that when he talks about the very term called dwelling perspective, uh, it is a perspective that tries or that attempts to situate uh, a human being in an active engagement with the constituents of his or her surroundings. And Team Ingoal specifically focuses on the, the hunter and gathering communities. On the other hand, we also have the works of Agrawal, who contends that the critical differences between uh, the knowledge system that is indigenous knowledge on the one hand and the scientific knowledge on the other lies in their relationship to power, that is the dynamics of power, and that is not necessarily the holders of indigenous knowledge to exercise the power to marginalized. So we have also looked into some of the ecological knowledge, subsistence, and livelihood practices based on the case study among the Kuki communities in Northeast India. So we have engaged upon how the Kuki communities for generations have uh, gained a knowledge system in the environment which they are exposed to, or in other words, in terms of the natural resource management. So many of these communities, not necessarily the Kuki communities, uh, but also other communities who are based in Northeast regions, can be perhaps clubbed or termed as an ecosystem people, uh, which are an integral part of the natural or cultural landscape around them, which is extensively based on the study of Professor Ramakrishnan's and his team. So the indigenous belief system reflect a spiritual connection based on their belief system, maybe in their pre-Christian days, in terms of how they give human beings a special responsibilities within the area they occupy as indigenous people, and also in terms of where they give a lot of reverence to different kinds of spirits or deities which are supposedly believed to be inhabiting those spaces. So therefore, based on this case studies, I argue that the indigenous knowledge systems of the Kuki perceive nature as sacred because it displays a close relations with their spirit world, uh, and which forms an important part of their uh, ecological knowledge. So therefore, it is this belief and practices which has been uh, handed down for generations, ensure a sustainable management of the landscape, for instance, when they engage in the shifting cultivations, for instance. and also the conservations of natural resources on the other hand in the past few centuries. So therefore, we could see that the principle of human nature or land-man connectedness is central to the cookie cosmology, as it is believed that humans' life is interconnected with the environment they are engaged with. So we have also taken up the theme on the debates on shifting cultivation by posing a question whether is shifting cultivation a form of sustainable natural resource management or not. So we have deliberated upon some of the anti-Jung discourses where the policy planners and ecologists uh, uh, initially tends to have that negative attitude toward these Jung practices, which is seen to be an evil practice solely responsible for deforestation. And we have also looked upon some of the perceptions, particularly the colonialist, their attitudes toward Jung. They were very much against such forms of uh, practices because of it doesn't really generate any forms of revenue to the state, and therefore many of these junglands are being declared as wasteland, and uh, there were also a lot of policies which are being designed in order to disallow or restrict people to engage in such forms of cultivation. So therefore, we could actually see that an old wine in a new bottle, where the various forest policies has been continuing with the colonial legacy in the post-independence period. So therefore, many of these forest policies were actually borrowed and carried forward right from the colonial period. So therefore, we could see that many of these communities who are considered as forest dwellers are often seen to be, as perpetrators of committing such forms of environmental concerns, or for that matter, deforestation. So therefore, we have also looked into the various issues of how there is advantages and disadvantages of the zooming in the context of by deliberating upon the environmental sustainability. So there are detailed studies being done by scholars like Kunglind, Geertz, and then you have Ramakrishnan, to name a few, which suggests that the Sweden cultivation or shifting cultivation as a system of land use does minimal damage to the environment and can be successfully used as a rational system in marginal areas. In fact, they have opined that the diversity of species or the cropping system in this form of cultivations ensure a kind of conservations of the precious minerals in the soil, and also captures the solar energy through the perennial plant cover. So therefore, it is in some way perceived to be pretty much environmental friendly in that sense. So they do have a certain sense of environmental ethics and knowledge system, owing to conserving nature in that sense. However, there are also the emphasis which is made on the modern when compared with the modern methods of cultivations, which not only tends to other or give or labeled such forms of cultivations as primitive method which is used by the indigenous people. So here we could see that the idea of how traditional forms of farming are being judged and being seen or which is seen from the Western civilization discourse, and to conclude that it is not really environmental friendly is something which we also need to think further. So therefore, we could see that these notions of how the very idea of uh, debate which involve in practices such as shifting cultivation is something which we can think about. So we have a 12-week course, and I'm sure many of you have done and submitted your weekly assignments on time, and the main exam is coming up. And I'm sure if you attend to the lectures in a much more attentive way, many of those questions which is going to be asked, it is not going to be really difficult and tough. So if any of you have any kind of doubts or anything, uh, feel free to ask me, and I'll be happy to deliberate upon it. So I'll stop here and wish you all the best for your exam. Thank you. Question tadi.